Why do people get obese? Why do they overeat the energy? Are you saying it's part of the gut microbiome?
It is part of GAPS. It is because these people are addicts. They're eating and overeating and choosing certain foods because they are addicted. Let me explain how it happens. Every GAPS person is an addict. Because those pathogenic microbes that overgrew in your digestive tract are very clever. When they eat foods, they produce their toxins, but part of that toxicity they make in the form of endorphins and other molecules which give your brain a pleasure signal. They absorb these chemicals, they get into your brain and get your brain addicted to them, to these chemicals. So the brain wants more. It demands these chemicals. These chemicals are produced from activity of those specific pathogenic microbes, and these microbes like certain foods and don't like other foods. So they dictate to your brain what foods you're going to like and what foods you're going to dislike. They turn you into a drug addict. You're not buying drugs on the corner of the street from drug dealers. The drug is manufactured in your own digestive system by your own microbial community. In the olden days, people used to say that he or she got possessed by the devil. Mm-hmm. Indeed, that's the situation. You got possessed. Not by the devil, but you got possessed by certain microbes which live right there in your own body. And they love chocolate muffins and breakfast cereals and bread and pasta and sugar and soft drinks and all of those processed carbohydrates. Absolutely love them. And these are the foods that the brain then demands. And it's a vicious cycle of addiction.
Eat human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
Seu apogeo.
Geek ninguém.
O melhor humano.
Hello, fellow sapiens. I'm Brian Sanders. We're back with another great episode this week. This time it's with Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride. She's an amazing person. Such a great interview. We went 2 hours. It was so good. We couldn't stop. She is a creator of the GAPS protocol. She's written a few books. She is a legend. Countless people around the world have healed using this diet. It's hard to quantify how many people she's helped because it's spread. It's a movement. She has all these practitioners that continue to teach her protocols, including Mary Ruddick, my pal, who we bring up in the episode. I actually witnessed this firsthand, the success from the GAPS diet. I was at a conference and met a woman who was in a wheelchair and had severe multiple sclerosis and healed it all. She was doing great. She was walking around feeling amazing from using the GAPS protocol, eating the GAPS diet. This stuff is so cool. It's an animal-based diet. It follows the sapien principles. It uses ancestral principles. It heals the gut. So interesting how she makes a compelling case that all disease pretty much starts in the gut. I'm telling you, this is such a great episode. You have to stick around to the end. We get to dairy at the very end. We get to some really great stuff at the very end, so stick around. Listen to it in chunks if you have to. She has such great ideas on how to raise food well, how to feed your community, how to decentralize, how to opt out, which is what we're doing. I got excited because this is a new project we're working on, the decentralized food system I mentioned. We got a little website up and an email list. It's sovereignhumans.org. We're still shaping it. We'd love everyone's help. It's going to be a community project. We're trying to feed people locally. We're trying to do something outside of Austin, build a community of people opting out of the system, feeding ourselves, helping people connect in whatever state they're in, even different countries, to connect to their local farmers, building nodes so we can get outside of the normal food system and have these nodes feed their community. That's a side project I'm working on with Colin, my buddy. Don't worry, he'll be managing most of it. I won't get distracted from the film. Food Lies film is going well, so well. A lot of it is out of my hands, actually. I have my great director and editor working on it daily. We have our motion graphics guy. They are working whenever I'm not working. We work on it daily. It's slow, but it's coming. Another thing we bring up in this episode is meat stock versus bone broth. And I talk about our nose to tail bone packages. You got to check these out. For chickens, we have entire carcasses. We have the heads, we have the feet. It makes the best broth ever. Whether it be stock or broth, you can make either. We have the bones for all the ruminant animals as well. We have the marrow canoes. We have bag of bones. We have the primal blend with all the organs mixed in. Check it all out at nosetotail.org. This is our new regenerative offering now. All of our ranchers are regenerative. We get it straight to the processor and directly to you. No middlemen. It really is kind of this decentralized food system in a sense. Get it locally if you can. If you can't, we got your back at nosetotail.org. All right, a little more about my guest, Dr. Campbell-McBride, graduated with honors as a medical doctor in 1984 from Bashkir Medical University in Russia. In the following years, she gained a postgraduate degree in neurology. After practicing for 5 years as a neurologist and 3 years as a neurosurgeon, she started a family and moved to the UK. It was during this time that Dr. Campbell-McBride developed her theories on the relationship between neurological disorders and nutrition, and completed a second postgraduate degree in human nutrition at Sheffield University, UK. She has specialized in using nutritional approach as a treatment and has been recognized as one of the world's leading experts in treating children and adults with learning disabilities and other mental disorders, as well as children and adults with digestive and immune disorders. In 2004, she published her first book, Gut and Psychology Syndrome, Natural Treatment of Autism, ADHD, Dyslexia, Dyspraxia, Depression, and Schizophrenia, where she explores the connection between the patient's physical state and brain function. The book gives full details of the GAPS nutritional protocol, highly successful in treating patients with chronic diseases. A second edition was published in 2010. The concept of GAPS has become a global phenomenon, and the book has been translated now into 24 languages. She's also the author of Put Your Heart in Your Mouth and Vegetarian Explained. She's also a member of the Society of Authors, the British Society for Environmental Medicine, and a board member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. She's a regular contributing health editor to a number of journals, magazines, newsletters, and radio programs around the world. She really is the real deal. She's helped millions of people around the world through her books, through her GAPS practitioner program, training program. So many great things she's doing. It was such a good episode, like I've been saying. Let me know what you think. Find me on Food Lies on any social media network or YouTube. Reach out. I love to get your messages. Get your regenerative meat at nosetotail.org. Share with a family or friend. Start back at episode 1. Give this podcast a review on iTunes or the podcast app. It really would help us. And please enjoy this episode.
All right, we're live. Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
I love it. Yep, you're over there near London. You are the creator of the GAPS protocol and diet. Why don't you kind of introduce GAPS and your background, please?
I'm a medical doctor, and I have created this concept called gut and psychology syndrome and gut and physiology syndrome. They're described in my books with the same names, gut and psychology syndrome and gut and physiology syndrome. And this condition is the root cause of all chronic illnesses in our modern world, mental and physical. I have no doubt about it. The concept basically is about the gut flora. We now have a lot of research, a lot of interest. Everybody heard that we have some microbes in our digestive system. And what we now know is absolutely staggering. What we know now is that the human body is an ecosystem. We are full of microbes. There is nothing microbe-free in your body. In your blood, in your brain, in your lungs, in your heart, in your abdominal cavity, everywhere there are microbial communities. There are more microbial cells in your body than there are human cells. They outweigh us. And the biggest community lives in your digestive system. Quite unsurprisingly, because any microbiologist in the world, a person who studies microbes, will tell you that the most powerful influence on any microbial community is food. You change the food supply to a microbial community, and that community immediately changes, transforms. Certain microbes die out, other microbes proliferate, and the whole community, the whole balance and harmony between them changes. That is why the biggest community of microbes lives inside our digestive system, because that's where food comes in. That's where we put our food, don't we? And depending on what we eat, every human being has a unique microbial community living in their digestive system. This microbial community, some scientists are telling us, is about 90% of all cells living in your body. 90%. It means that you are just 10%. You're a shell, a habitat for this mass of microbes living inside you. And we are indeed, to a large degree, are at their mercy. They control not only food absorption and digestion, they control your immune system. Your immune function is intertwined with that microbial community very, very closely. And they're in control of how your blood works. They're in control of how your heart beats. They're in control of how you think, what emotions you have, and how you react to everything in the world. Because they're in control of your brain activity, brain biochemistry, and health of the brain, and nourishment of the brain, and how clean or how polluted your brain is. It's an amazing and a fascinating area. And we in the holistic world have been talking about it for the last 20 years, because GAPS nutritional protocol has been in existence for 20 years. It's a global phenomenon. My first book came out in 2004, but I started my work quite a while before then, before the book came out. And the basis of the whole GAPS nutritional protocol and the idea of GAPS is that that microbial community in your gut is in charge of you, in charge of everything that's going on in your body. Every microbial community can only function if there is balance and harmony between different members of the community, because they all plant each other, harvest each other, control each other, and don't allow each other to get out of control, any one of them, because every one of those microbes is capable of causing disease. But as long as all the members of the community are there, and they all in the right proportions, they control each other. And as a community, it works. It's balanced, it's harmonious. And if it's balanced and harmonious, then it sings a beautiful symphony. And that symphony reverberates throughout your whole body, and your body sings. Your body is healthy and balanced and harmonious and works for you very well. Problem is, we human beings, particularly modern human beings, are very good at creating imbalances in nature. We have saturated our environment with so many nasty chemicals, with so many electromagnetic polluting things, with so many influences that break down that harmony and the balance in nature between different forms of life on our planet. And it's the microbes in particular that we waged a war upon for more than 100 years now, with powerful chemicals, with powerful influences, and we have achieved some things with that. There's no doubt about it, but we've caused more damage than probably we've done good with the whole situation. And even our mainstream now is realizing that. Every time you take an antibiotic, you kill off a bunch of microbes in your digestive system. And not only in your digestive system. When that antibiotic absorbs, it affects microbial communities everywhere else in your body. Because every organ, every tissue, every liquid in your body has a microbial community in it. So when that antibiotic killed off a bunch of microbes, the remaining members of the microbial community suddenly get out of balance. The harmony is gone. The balance is gone. So certain species start proliferating, growing out of proportion, and from being benign and beneficial to you, they suddenly become your enemies. They suddenly start causing serious trouble in your body. What happens in GAPS? People have abnormal gut flora. Whether this is a child who inherited that abnormal gut flora from mommy and daddy, because the parents pass their gut flora to their baby. This process begins during pregnancy, even during 9 months of pregnancy. As soon as the baby has a digestive system in its little body, it starts developing a gut flora in that digestive system. And that flora comes from what lives in the uterus of the mother, because we have placental flora, we have uterine flora. Women's organs in that area are not sterile. They're not microbe-free. They have rich microbial community in there. And the father contributes regularly through sexual contact, through his gut flora, because his gut flora populates his groin and all the organs in his groin, and then he shares that flora with the mother on a regular basis. That's how both the mother and the father contribute their gut flora to the baby. And then at the moment of birth, as the baby goes through the birth canal, It swallows liquids in the mother's birth canal, in the vagina, and gets the gut flora from the mother and the father, whatever lives in the birth canal of the woman. Where does the vaginal flora come from? From the bowel of the woman. If she has abnormal gut flora, she will pass that to her baby during birth. That's how children acquire their gut flora from mommy and daddy. We have generations of people in the world, and not only in the Western world. This epidemic is spreading all over the globe now because our corporations are global and they're polluting the planet globally, our global corporations. What's happening is, with every generation, the destructive influences on the microbial communities and the nature becoming more and more intense. And the parents pass their abnormal gut flora to their children, and with every generation, that damage in a child becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. I have discovered that by working with my patients, because before I talk about the health of a child, for example, in my clinic, I would always talk about the health of the parents and the grandparents. And a typical picture has emerged. If a grandfather and grandmother acquired their gut flora before the antibiotic era, let's say they were born before the Second World War, when the antibiotics haven't been discovered yet, not on the market yet, the whole planet was organic. Just think about that. There were no agricultural chemicals. So these people were born on a planet with organic food, no antibiotics, no vaccinations, no agricultural chemicals, fairly clean environment. And they acquired pristine, undamaged gut flora from their parents, which means they acquired a solid, healthy constitution, the kind of constitution a human being should have. And they ate a traditional diet at that time, not affected by all our modern nutritional so-called wisdom or so-called scientific manipulations that have been coming into the nutritional world. So these people acquired a very good, solid constitution. But then they grew up through the war. The antibiotics came out on the market in the 50s, and en masse they came out in the 60s. So before having their own children, this generation of people maybe got one course or two courses of antibiotics for a cold or for pneumonia or something else, which damaged their gut flora very slightly. They passed that slightly damaged gut flora to their child at the moment of birth. Then their children grew up in a very different world. Throughout their childhood, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were given antibiotics every winter for every cough and sneeze on a regular basis. At the same time, after the Second World War, many chemicals that were used in the concentration camps in Germany were repurposed for agriculture. A chemical industrial agriculture was born that way. So the food of these children that they grew up on was increasingly laced with many, many toxic chemicals. And most of agricultural chemicals in our modern world are antibiotics in their nature. They even patent it as broad-spectrum antibiotics. Good example is glyphosate, Roundup herbicide. When it was first discovered, it was patented as a broad-spectrum antibiotic. And now research shows that every bite of food you buy in a supermarket, including labeled organic, is full of glyphosate. So modern people are eating antibiotics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with their food that they're buying in supermarkets. So that generation, let's come back to that generation of people. So they grew up in a world where agricultural industry appeared. The food became more and more chemicalized, more and more hybridized. Antibiotics were given to them on a very regular basis throughout their childhood. And then the girls in that generation were put on a contraceptive pill when they were teenagers. And they took that contraceptive pill for quite a few years before they were ready to start their family. And people started having children later and later in life, accumulating toxicity, accumulating chemicals in their bodies, accumulating damage, and using the contraceptive pills. Contraceptive pills have a devastating effect on the woman's hormonal system and her gut flora, her microbial community in the body. So by the time that generation decided to have their first baby, their gut flora was seriously damaged, far more damaged than it was damaged in their parents' generation. And that's the gut flora they pass to their child. So their child begins their life with a very different constitution, a very different starting point. And this situation every year is getting harder and harder, worse and worse. It's an avalanche coming upon humanity. And this is the situation of this epidemic of gaps. I call this situation gaps. Abnormal gut flora causing disease in the body. This situation is the root cause, the underlying root cause for our epidemic of autism. We have an absolute epidemic of autism, disaster. Our epidemic of mental illnesses, epidemic of ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, schizophrenia, and diabetes type 1 in babies and children. Epidemic of our autoimmune illnesses. All of them are gaining epidemic proportions. Our epidemics of cancer, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, all sorts of things. All of these problems. Because the roots of our health are in the gut. They are sitting in that gut flora. What is that gut flora in your digestive system? It's the soil inside you. What is soil? Look at our planet. What is soil under your feet? Soil under your feet is the source of all life. That's where all life begins and all life ends on our planet. And it is a rich microbial community. Healthy soil is full. It is a diverse and balanced and harmonious microbial community. And it is this microbial community that feeds the roots of the plant, allows the plants to thrive and grow on our planet, and makes our planet green. That microbial community. Every time we plow, till, apply chemicals to the soil, we kill those microbes. We destroy that microbial community. And as a result, plants cannot grow. And indeed, it has been stated now that most fields, arable fields in the Western world, are deserts for all intents and purposes. The soil is dead. There is no microbial community in that soil. It's just a dead dust. And what the farmers are saying, I know quite a few farmers around us who are hereditary farmers. They grew up on a farm, hundreds of years, families that passed the farm on. And these men in their 70s and 80s are now saying that when I was a boy, everything grew on the fields without any chemicals, and there were worms in the soil. Now there are no worms, and if I don't apply chemicals to my fields, nothing will grow on them at all. So all the nutrition for these beautifully looking fields comes from chemicals. And thank God it rains in the UK, where I live, in the United Kingdom. If it wasn't raining, we would have sand dunes here, because the soils are dead on these fields. People have been doing this for decades to the soils on our planet, and at the same time, they are doing it to the soils inside themselves. That microbial community which coats every square millimeter of your digestive tract is the soil inside you. And the roots of your health are literally sitting in that soil. You are a plant growing in that soil. We can even confirm that microscopically, because the gut lining has finger-like protrusions, microscopical protrusions called villi. And every villus is sitting in that soil deep, deep, deep. And then from every villus there are hair-like roots, very long hair roots, also going into that soil, called microvilli. These are the roots of your health. That is where digestion and absorption of food happens. And that's what sustains your body and keeps you healthy and well and gives you vitality. That's where it all comes from. If you kill that soil, nothing will grow on it at all. And I have met so many people who look like a wilted plant, because their roots have, like a plant whose roots have been pulled out of the soil. Because the soil that the root is sitting in is dead, literally dead, or is abnormal, unhealthy, and causing problems. So what happens in majority of people nowadays, and majority of people from my perspective are gapsters in the Western world, particularly younger generations, because they went through this generational destruction of the gut flora in humanity. What happens in there? Pathogens overgrow, because the balance is gone and it's being damaged all the time by all the agricultural chemicals, antibiotic-like chemicals in their food that they're eating all the time, these people. These pathogens damage the integrity of the gut wall. It becomes porous and leaky. Holes develop in your gut. So food doesn't have a chance to be digested properly before it absorbs. It absorbs undigested. Then the immune system finds these undigested foods in your bloodstream, looks at them and says, "You're not food. I don't recognize you," and attacks them. And this attack shows up as a food allergy or intolerance. People, when they have their gut lining like a sieve, they're reacting to everything they eat. If you had enough resources to test yourself for food allergy and intolerance every day for 2 weeks, you will discover that indeed you're reacting to everything you eat. As long as your gut wall is like a sieve, you're absorbing most of your foods undigested. And the reaction can be immediate or delayed, and it can show up as any symptom at all. It can be an asthma attack, a skin rash, a migraine, a panic attack, drop in energy, or heart palpitations, or psoriasis, or cholecystitis, or anything else, any kind of symptom under the sun. And the reaction can be immediate or it can be delayed. So on any given day, you have no idea what you're reacting to. You can be reacting to something you just had for lunch, plus something you had yesterday, plus something you had 2 weeks ago. All these reactions overlap on top of each other. Not only undigested foods absorb through these holes in your gut wall, but myriad of toxins. Because pathogenic microbes in your gut start digesting food in their own way, converting it into many different chemicals which are toxic for the human body. They absorb, they get into your blood, into your lymph, get distributed around your body, and wherever they get to, they cause disease. If they get into your brain, they will cause a mental illness, which can start from a mild brain fog, mild memory lapses, or maybe some mood swings, forgetfulness, and can finish up with a full-blown autism, or full-blown ADHD, or schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, or something else. It depends on the mixture of toxicity and how heavy that toxic load is. And that's where autism fits in. These babies, from my point of view, 100% of modern autistic children were born with a perfectly normal brain. These were perfectly normal babies. But they got abnormal gut flora from mommy and daddy from day one of their lives. And their gut became a sieve and became a major source of toxicity. A river of toxins flow from the gut into the blood and get into the brain of this baby, of this child. And how do babies learn to be a human being? They use their senses. They use their hearing, they listen to everything, they look at everybody, they touch everything, they take everything into their mouth. What are they doing? They're collecting information from the environment using their sensory organs. And then these organs pass that information to the brain to be processed, and that's how the child learns to become a human being and behave like a human being. But if the brain is clogged with toxicity, it cannot process this information normally, properly. This information turns into a noise, into a mush in the child's brain, and the brain cannot decipher anything useful from that noise. In that situation, the child becomes autistic. The development of the child is affected, the child becomes autistic. If the mixture of toxicity is different, maybe not so heavy, the child may become just hyperactive, or develop attention deficit without hyperactivity, or dyslexia, dyspraxia, oppositional defiant disorder. The list is growing all the time. And most of these children do not fit into any diagnostic box because GAPS is underneath. The real diagnosis is GAPS. And every child is unique and has unique gut flora and a unique mixture of toxins bombarding the brain. That is why most of these children have a little bit of autism and a bit of ADHD and a bit of dyslexia and a bit of that and this and the other. None of it fits into any diagnostic box. So the pediatricians really struggle to give them a diagnosis. It takes a long time. But the important thing for the parents to understand that there is no need for the diagnosis. Diagnosis is not going to serve your child in any possible way. It's not going to help in any possible way. So there's no point to even struggle for that diagnostic label. What you want to do, you want to get rid of these gaps in your child. And that is what the GAPS nutritional protocol does. That is what we do. And the younger the child is, when we catch the child and start the GAPS diet, the quicker these children recover and the more fully they recover. Because what we do with the GAPS nutritional protocol we rebalance that microbial community in the gut. We bring in microbes, we drive out pathogens, we bring down the pathogenic growth, and we rebalance, bring balance and harmony back to it. And at the same time, we heal and seal the gut wall. In fact, we build a new, shiny gut wall for the child with our nutrients, with the diet, with what the diet provides for the child. And once these two things happen, the gut wall closed itself, sealed itself, all those holes got closed up, and the microbial community has rebalanced itself. That river of toxicity coming from the gut to the brain stops, and the brain cleans up. Human brain, like human heart, or human lungs, or any other part of our beautiful, miraculous bodies, has a powerful ability to cleanse itself. They cleanse themselves all the time. They heal themselves all the time. They rejuvenate themselves all the time. So once the toxic river stops, the attack stops, every organ will cleanse and will regain its normal function, the way it should do it. So obviously, the younger child is, when that moment happens, the less damage is inflicted upon that child. The longer the child's brain is stuck in that situation of being bombarded by poisonous chemicals, and of course the immune system will not stand by, it will add inflammation, add autoimmunity, add its own attack on the brain, causing the more physical damage is inflicted upon that little pristine, healthy brain that the baby was born with. And the more entrenched becomes autism or any other disorder in these children. So the younger the child is, that's when we want to catch them, and that's when we want to implement the protocol with these children, to get rid of autism entirely, completely. If that didn't happen, if the child is older, there's no need to despair, because there will be improvements, and it is impossible to predict to what degree. The child may not stop being autistic, but will function at the maximum capacity, at the maximum of its ability. And you can never predict. We had children in their early teens who went up like a rocket, became almost indistinguishable from their normal peers, normally functioning peers. So that's the brain. But if this toxic river gets into any other part of the body, it will cause disease. All autoimmune illness is a GAPS condition. Every autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Hashimoto, psoriasis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, multiple sclerosis. There are best part of 200 different conditions identified as autoimmune nowadays. All of them are born in the gut, regardless whether you've got digestive symptoms or not. I had quite a few patients with rheumatoid arthritis and other conditions like that who said, well, my gut is all right. No diarrhea, no constipation, no pain, no gas. I seem to be okay in that department. But when we change their diet and we put them on the GAPS nutritional protocol, rheumatoid arthritis disappears, showing us on the way that indeed the roots of it were sitting in the gut. The same with multiple sclerosis, the same with Lyme disease, the same with histamine intolerance, with psoriasis, with eczema, with asthma, with allergies, with any chronic condition, no matter in which organ it manifests, from your nervous system to your skin, everywhere. And certainly every digestive disorder, no matter how mild or severe, can be healed using the GAPS diet, the GAPS nutritional protocol. This is what GAPS is about. And I say I've written 2 books. My first one, Gut and Psychology, came out almost 20 years ago now. It's been translated into 24 languages, and more translations are coming out. I'm not translating the book. It's translated by people in their own countries because they feel that they need that information. Because GAPS is a global phenomenon, and there is a need for this information all over the world. This is the gut and physiology syndrome. This book focuses on the rest of the body. The first book focused on the brain. This one focuses on the rest of the body, and it came out last year. It has the latest information on GAPS. We have been training health practitioners and other health practitioners, other people in the GAPS nutritional protocol. So now we have thousands of certified GAPS practitioners all over the world who are working with individual patients to help them. And we have a new profession called the GAPS coach. These are people who have experience with gaps. They've healed their child, or they've healed themselves, or helped other members of their family, and gained a lot of practical experience. So we created a course for them, and the courses are run on online at gapstraining.com, and we train these people's hands-on practitioners who can come to your home, help you cook, help you shop, help you deal with daily problems, with daily struggles and daily challenges. Because many GAPS patients don't have enough energy to cook for themselves, to look after themselves, particularly people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, mothers of autistic children who are exhausted, mothers of other children with learning disabilities and problems who are exhausted. It's difficult for them to focus and to organize themselves. So a practitioner like that, a GAPS coach, can come into your home and do a lot of work for you and help you to start and get you on the right road and get you on the straight and narrow. So that is what GAPS is about.
Wow. Well, you did all the work for me. What an amazing intro. You basically just did a TED Talk for us here. You did a live presentation. Wow, I love it. We can dive into some of these topics now. I don't even know where to start. I've always had this idea that there was two sides to all disease. I think you're kind of boiling down to one side. I split up the gut problems, whatever you want to call it, the GAP stuff, the gut microbiome, all that. And then I say energy toxicity, right? And it could be like a Venn diagram and overlay on each other. And most people probably have both. But energy toxicity meaning people eating too much extra energy, extra food, extra fats and carbs, and carrying excess body weight. So I don't know if you think that starts with the gut problems and, maybe that causes them to overeat. But I split it up because there are the physical gut problems and all the microbiome, everything you've listed, but then also the problem with overstuffed fat cells, getting into type 2 diabetes and the insulin resistance and all the other problems associated, storing extra visceral fat. And the insulin side, to me, is just the energy toxicity side, which is eating too much fat or carbs, well, both. And why did that happen? How did that happen? And I want to know if you kind of agree with that, the overlap. Maybe you're saying most of it is with the gut, which I could agree with. But why do people, get obese? Why do they overeat the energy? Are you saying it's part of the, the gut microbiome?
Absolutely. It is part of GAPS. It is because these people are addicts. They're eating and overeating and choosing certain foods because they are addicted. Let me explain how it happens. Every GAPS person is an addict because those pathogenic microbes that overgrew in your digestive tract are very clever. When they eat foods, they produce their toxins, but part of that toxicity they make in the form of endorphins and other molecules which give your brain a pleasure signal. They absorb these chemicals, they get into your brain and get your brain addicted to them, to these chemicals. So the brain wants more. It demands these chemicals. These chemicals are produced from activity of those specific pathogenic microbes. And these microbes like certain foods and don't like other foods. So they dictate to your brain what foods you're going to like and what foods you're going to dislike. They turn you into a drug addict. You're not buying drugs on the corner of the street from drug dealers. The drug is manufactured in your own digestive system by your own microbial community. In the olden days, people used to say that he or she got possessed by the devil. Mm-hmm. Indeed, that's the situation. You got possessed. Not by the devil, but you got possessed by certain microbes which live right there in your own body. And they love chocolate muffins and breakfast cereals. Mm-hmm. And bread and pasta and sugar, and soft drinks and all of those processed carbohydrates. Absolutely love them. And these are the foods that the brain then demands. And it's a vicious cycle of addiction. It's a drug addiction. And babies, 6 months old, 1 year old, 1.5, are drug addicts, GAPS babies with abnormal gut flora. They limit their foods to these very toxic foods which feed that vicious cycle of addiction. And they would refuse all other foods from babyhood all the way to the end of their lives. The whole life, all sorts of ages of people can be trapped in that vicious cycle of addiction. And these people just say, well, I don't like proper meals. I like fast food. Well, I don't want to eat meat and vegetables, or I don't want to eat eggs and vegetables. I don't want to eat fish and vegetables. No, I want pasta. I want chocolate muffins. I want breakfast cereal. I like these things. It's not you who likes it. Your body has been taken over by certain microbes which like these things, and they dictate to your brain what you're going to like and what you're not going to like. And not only that, they dictate to you what emotions you're going to experience, how you're going to react in certain situations, what enzymes and other chemicals you're going to produce, neurotransmitters, for example, you're going to produce and which you're not going to produce. They predetermine your whole personality. Because what we're now learning is that majority of neurotransmitters, these are chemicals that the brain actively uses for functioning, are manufactured in the gut. And then after they've been manufactured in the gut, they are transported to the brain to be used. And this is serotonin. Serotonin is your happy, positive neurotransmitter. That's what makes you enjoy life, feel positive about life, and have the fullness of the experience in life with joy in it. Dopamine, which gives us motivation, and many, many other. So GABA, which prevents anxiety and keeps you on a balanced keel, and many, many other neurotransmitters. They are manufactured in the gut. And if your gut flora is abnormal, you are not manufacturing them. Or you may be manufacturing them in a very unbalanced fashion. Some parts of the day you may produce a spike, another part of the day it will be a deep drop in certain neurotransmitters. In an imbalance with another neurotransmitter, it's a complete mess. And that's what your brain receives. And it will react to this chemical soup with emotional instability, with panic attacks, with anxiety attacks, with memory lapses, with cranky behavior, with all sorts of behaviors. And you think that that's just you. It is not you. You've been possessed by the microbial community that lives inside your digestive system and rules your body. It turns you into an addict, so you eat only foods that feed them, and you behave in ways that it pleases them, basically,
Yeah.
and suits this pathogenic microbial community. So in order to break that vicious cycle, in order to get out of that, and here we come to actually addictions, people who are addicted to illicit drugs, drug addicts, alcohol addicts, tobacco addicts, addicts to gambling, to sex, to workaholics, alcoholics, various forms of addiction. That addictive personality was laid in the childhood through the use of sugar. The most addictive substance in the world is sugar. Far more addictive than any illicit drug. The morphine, heroin, cocaine, or whatever, LSD, far more addictive. And because it is socially acceptable to eat sugar, people dismiss the idea that it is an addictive drug. A bottle of a soft drink, a typical soft drink, a small bottle, can contain up to 8 teaspoons of sugar in it. And children are brought up considering sweets to be treats, and the soft drinks, guzzling the soft drinks all day long. I went to South America, to various countries, and there people drink Coca-Cola from babyhood. That's their main drink. They consider that it's good for them. Mm-hmm. So people get addicted to sugar, and that addicted personality, the basis for it is laid down. So what happens when then people become addicted to sugar, addicted to processed carbohydrates, anything processed, any processed carbohydrates, and that is processed grains, anything made out of flour, bread, pasta, cakes, biscuits, buns, breakfast cereals, and the porridges, any other cereal product, starchy foods, potatoes, potato snacks, and various snacks and processed junk food. These things are pre-digested for you in the factory. They absorb as sugar. They absorb as glucose, molecules of glucose, fructose, and other single sugars. They absorb very quickly, just like sugar does. And they're usually washed down by a sugary soft drink, these sort of things. So human body is designed to use some sugar, but in a limited proportion. It has to come in a state of a natural food. If you eat an apple, or if you eat grain as it is, whole grain as it is, it's difficult to digest. It takes a long time for the body to digest it and absorb the sugars, and the sugar trickles into your blood gradually, slowly, in small amounts. That is what the body is designed to handle. But when you eat a bun or a breakfast cereal and wash it down with coffee with sugar in it, or a soft drink, or a sandwich with a soft drink, or pasta with something sugary as well, like that, you dump a huge amount of sugar into your bloodstream at once, suddenly. Human body has not been designed to handle that. We have not been designed to handle that. Too high sugar in the blood is something that is controlled very tightly by the body, but because too high, too low can kill. So the body has very solid mechanisms to deal with those excesses. So when the sugar goes too high, the body pumps out insulin, hormone produced by your pancreas, in order to remove that sugar out of the blood and push it into the cells, largely into the muscle cells in the body and other cells in the body. To remove it out of the blood, put it in the cells. The muscle cells will use that sugar for production of energy, and the excessive sugar that doesn't fit into the muscle cells will be put into fat cells, where sugar is converted into fat. That's what insulin does. It converts that breakfast cereal, that sugary drink in your body, into fat, body fat, and it will lay it in your fat tissues, excesses of it. And this mechanism can work for a while, for quite a few years, because this abuse of sugar begins in an early childhood, usually in the modern world. But then at a certain point, it starts breaking up, because the cells in the body have a limited capacity, how much sugar they can take. At a certain point, they say, enough, we can't take anymore. The way they say it, what they do, they damage or break or destroy those little doors that insulin opens for the sugar to usher it into the cell. Because sugar on its own cannot leave the bloodstream and cannot get into the cell. It's insulin that's the key that opens a little door on the cell and pushes the sugar in, and then closes the door. The cell starts destroying those doors. It becomes resistant to insulin. But the person continues eating sugar, continues eating processed carbohydrates and sandwiches and buns and bread and pasta. And what is the body to do in that sort of situation? It ramps up the insulin production. More insulin, more insulin, more insulin, to the point of pancreas being exhausted at working so hard, producing insulin all the time. And what all this excessive insulin will do, if you have too much insulin, high level of insulin in your blood, permanently, and all these people have permanently very high level of insulin, many things go wrong in the body. Number one, you start laying down weight, you start gaining weight, and you cannot lose it. As long as insulin is high in your blood, because insulin is a master fat storage hormone. As long as you have high insulin in your blood, you'll be storing everything you eat as fat. A piece of lettuce will be stored as fat. And depending on your hormonal balance in the body, in some people this fat will be laid in the thighs and the buttocks and the lower part of the body. In other people it will be laid in the upper part of the body, depending on other hormones active in the body. If you also have a lot of stress at the same time and a lot of cortisol being produced in your body, then you become top heavy. And we have many women in our world which are top heavy. They've got thin legs and they've got wide waists and big top. You know, the top of the body lays all the fat. So they look masculine, these women. They don't have a feminine body as a result. So it depends on the hormonal balance. Apart from laying fat onto you and storing it and storing it and storing it, another thing that insulin will do, it creates chronic inflammation in the body. Because insulin initiates inflammation and it will not allow it to stop. Inflammation is a very important tool that the immune system uses for fighting infections and toxins and various insults in our bodies. It's a very, very important tool. It's very effective. And the immune system is using it all the time. But once the inflammation has done its job, it's supposed to subside and stop. But if the insulin is high in your blood, the inflammation cannot stop. It will go on and on and on. And you will be constantly in a pro-inflammatory state. You will have chronic systemic inflammation. And that can show itself up. And that's what we observe, actually, in all people with obesity, even people who are slightly overweight, people with diabetes, with heart disease, with cancer, with autoimmune illness. We find that they are constantly in a pro-inflammatory state. They have a constant background inflammation going on in the body. And that will lay the ground for any kind of disease in the body, any way you like. That is called a metabolic syndrome. And it stems from addiction. It begins from indulgence, that the parents think, oh, well, I'll give a sweetie to my child or buy them a soft drink, as a treat. I don't know where that idea came from, that giving a poison to your child should be seen as a treat, as treating your child. That is not a treat, that is a betrayal of your child. And that basis is laid in early childhood, so the child becomes an addict. And that lays the ground for this metabolic syndrome. This metabolic syndrome, what is metabolic syndrome? Too much insulin in the body. That's what it is. It lays the ground for formation of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and cancer. This is the bouquet of the illnesses that people get from that seemingly innocent treat that the grandmother gave the child, or the mother gave the child, or the father, or whoever else.
Yeah.
I have described the whole thing in my book. I'm sorry, I keep showing you the books, but this is, I think, the easiest thing to do. So if any of you are interested to understand this concept in detail, please read this book. It's fully referenced for those who are scientifically minded and for medical professionals. And it explains what actually causes heart disease. Because it's not cholesterol and it is not fat. That is a lie and a manipulation that the population was given for far too long by the mainstream, that cholesterol and fat cause heart disease. They do not. They prevent heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all these other illnesses, and they reverse them. They're essential for us to eat. And the GAPS diet is rich in animal fats and rich in cholesterol on purpose. And that's why I had to write this book, because every time I would explain the diet to a prospective client or a patient, they would all ask me the same question. What about heart disease? So I felt that I have to write this book to explain this to people.
I appreciate those books, and I think everyone listening appreciates the sentiment that animal foods are healthy, cholesterol, saturated fat are great. We talked earlier about the Food Lies film before we started recording, and you're out there debunking a lot of these food lies. We're going to do it in the film. I like your thing where you do bring the root cause to the addiction and to the gut, because I always go for the deeper level of why. I don't care, people saying, oh, calories in, calories out, that's meaningless to me. That's meaningless. You're just saying water is wet. I'm asking, why did someone eat too many calories? Why did they gain weight? And when you get to the core of it, you're saying it's their gut, their addiction. And I've seen this. I've seen this myself. I've seen this in many people, that it is because they're overeating these foods because they're addicted. They're designed to be overeaten, and they're bad. Yeah, they're poison, as you said. They're just a whole bunch of processed energy, whether it be seed oils or refined grains or sugar, and mathematically, you can't really maintain a healthy body composition if you're eating those foods. So we can blame it on the foods themselves, which I like to do, blaming it on the processed foods. But if you go one level deeper, you're kind of saying, why did someone even eat those processed foods in the first place? Which is really interesting, but there's a lot of reasons our society's set up like that. Like you're just saying, oh, the grandma gives them the treat. Everyone's just giving them the treat. This is part of our modern society that kind of makes no sense, where we're just wanting treats all the time. We're giving people the wrong foods. You're setting themselves up to fail no matter what. And I did a visual of this, a sugar monster. I had a picture of a sort of this weird being, and the gut was talking to it, right? The stomach was this evil monster. And I called the sugar monster. And so many people, the sugar monster is talking to them. It's speaking to them. And you're saying that is true. They have the chemical pathways of, from your gut to your brain. And it is talking to you. It is what you eat makes you want to eat the wrong things. And I've seen this in myself. I remember when I first started getting to this stuff 7 or 8 years ago, I was resistant. I was like, I just still like my bread, and, I'll just eat it once a day, or I'll eat, these tortillas once a day. And nothing really changed until I cut those out. And it's hard because you have this conversation in your head of justifying why you can eat these or why it's okay. And it doesn't get better until you cut them out. And so many people I know have cut things out. They've gone on, the certain types of GAPS is similar to, sort of a carnivore diet with broth and like a well-rounded animal-based diet. You get rid of all those sugars and starches and you change your gut, and then you don't have those cravings anymore. And I did this, and I was amazing because I did I guess you could call it like a reset, right? And you get rid of all these foods, and all of a sudden you don't think of it. It's not like I used to think of dessert every day back, I'm like, oh man, I want to eat something sweet after dinner. You cut out all of the plant foods for a while. I didn't have that. It was insane. I just did not have that feeling anymore. It's so big.
Addictions are not easy to treat. And this is an addiction. Very powerful addiction.
And
that is why people find it so difficult to change their diet.
Oh, it's so hard because it's everywhere. That's what I was going to say. I wrote down it's hard, though. You're saying all these things, but it's like people will say, hey, this is our society. What do you mean I can't eat a pie with my grandma? When it's so hard. I get all the stuff you're saying, but I also see how it's almost impossible for people, especially people who aren't listening to this show. People listening to this show get it. They've been eating animal-based diets. They generally, understand this. They avoid the processed foods. But the 90% of the world out there, what do? How do they? It's kind of a far-fetched thing for them to do.
You can't help everybody. You can only help people who are ready for you. There is no point to knock on closed doors. You'll only get a bruised forehead. You can only help those who are ready for you, because healing and life altogether is a journey. It's a journey, and some people are walking down. Other people are walking up, and other people are sort of staying on the same level. And it's only people who are walking up that meet you at certain level, and only at that point they can hear you. Before then, they can't even hear you. They don't even perceive what you're trying to tell them. They don't hear your message because they're not ready. So you can't help everybody.
You're right. Well, we can get into solutions a bit later. I wanted to go back to the autism stuff and just the picky eaters and the ADHD in kids. I've seen different documentaries. I've known people who have kids that have these problems, and I think it's a big one that they claim they're like, hey, they only eat goldfish. All they want is chicken nuggets, goldfish, and mac and cheese. That's the only thing they'll eat. And
they're addicts.
Yeah.
These are little addicts, and we have a whole protocol which we teach. We are at gapstraining.com. We're now going to launch a couple more courses. One of those courses will be for the parents, for the patients and the parents. So as they're implementing the diet, they can go through the course where all their questions will be answered, and they will be taught, and they will find all the resolutions. And part of these courses will be how to deal with a fussy eater. These little children are drug addicts. They're addicted to that flow of toxicity coming from that digested piece of bread or that digested chocolate muffin. They need that because the monster that is sitting inside their digestive system, which is possessing their body, which has taken over completely and is causing that autism or hyperactivity or dyslexia or whatever else the child has, it's that microbial community that is causing it. That's the cause of it. That microbial community, to maintain itself, wants chocolate muffins, wants crisps, wants junk, wants soft drinks, breakfast cereals. And until you stop feeding that monster will not die because you have to kill it. Literally, you have to remove it, you have to kill it, you have to drive it out of the body and replace it with good, balanced microbial flora. Only then your child will come out of ADHD. Or autism, or dyslexia, or dyspraxia, or anything else. And as long as the parents understand that, they can do it. We have a protocol for doing it. It's a behavioral protocol. And the more severe end of autistic children, we have a very prescribed procedure for what you do, how to break your child out of that vicious cycle, because these children are very difficult, and many of them are very strong-willed. And sick children altogether learn from very young age to rule the household. They're in charge in the family, because the parents have given away their parental power, bit by bit, step by step, over the years, to this child. Just don't scream, just don't tantrum, just don't throw yourself on the floor, just don't do this and don't do that. And as a result, the child is in charge of the whole family dynamic. When you start changing the diet, when you stop the child from eating what they're demanding, you are regaining your parental power, you're taking it back. And many of these children would not release that power easily. They would put up quite a fight.
Oh, I've seen children.
Very, very true. That's right. So it's very important to follow that behavioral protocol that we have strictly. Mm-hmm. It takes at least 2 adults in the first few days to break the horse, as we call it, because you're dealing with a child who is possessed by a microbial community, and that microbial community is hungry, and it wants that processed carbohydrate. It demands it through the child's brain, because they are holding the child's brain in their little hands. Mm-hmm. They're ruling it. So it takes 2 adults. 1 adult makes sure that the child cannot leave the situation. So maybe it's a father, maybe it's a grandmother, or somebody else in the family who stands behind the chair where the child is sitting and gently holding the child, so the child cannot jump off that chair and run away from the table. The mother is feeding. The whole procedure is very positive, so both adults should have smiles on their faces and be very positive and be very calm, which is difficult, particularly in the first few days, because parents are nervous. The grandmothers are often just an impediment, they probably have to be kept away, so it's possibly the father or somebody hired that is helping. So you make a meat stock, and that is the basis of the GAPS diet, the meat stock. Not bone broth. Please don't confuse the two. There is a confusion in the world between bone broth and meat stock. GAPS is meat stock. And I explain in my books how to do that and what's the difference. Meat stock is chock full of building blocks for the gut lining of the child. Remember, we're building new gut lining for your child. In order to build it, building materials are required. And that meat stock will provide all the building materials necessary for your child to heal and seal its gut wall. Stop that pre-birth toxicity flowing from the gut. And those pathogenic monsters inside the gut of the child don't like meat stock. They will not thrive on it. It will feed the right kind of microbial community to rise again, and to replenish and to remove those pathogens there. So the more cups of meat stock the child consumes per day, the quicker they recover. So we start with a lovely, delicious chicken stock that we make at home from a whole chicken, plus chicken giblets, plus chicken feet, if you can get them, necks and heads and other bits and pieces of the chicken. And you cook it for a couple of hours in water with salt and pepper. That's all there is to it. So this lovely meat stock. We start with a small, achievable target, 1 teaspoon at a time, for a reward. And the reward needs to be really motivating for the child. So it should be favorite toy, favorite game, favorite video on the TV, or favorite anything. Maybe it's just a pickable, maybe it's tickles, maybe it's horses around the house, maybe whatever works for this particular child. And the parents need to understand that from that moment on, as we're working on the diet, that reward is not available at any other time. It's reserved only for food. Because these children are clever. No matter how disabled they are, they will wait for another moment to get their reward when food is not involved.
Wow.
So they need to understand there is no way of backing away out of this situation, whistling out, turning left, turning right, only going through. There's no other way. So the child cannot leave the situation. The reward is in front of the child, but he can't reach it. And we're only asking for 1 teaspoon. We're only asking the child to take 1 teaspoon and swallow it for a reward. And in some children, it takes a whole day to get them to swallow that 1 teaspoon. We had children who took a whole 8 hours. Parents were exhausted, everybody's exhausted, the child's exhausted, but for those 8 hours, the child cannot leave the situation. He cannot jump off the chair and run away. He has to sit there at the table. Mommy has to sit there, and the second person has to stand behind the chair and not let the child leave. But as soon as the child swallows that 1 teaspoon, he gets the reward and he gets over-exaggerated praise from the parents, from both adults. Throw him up in the air, kiss him, hug him, tickle him, give him whatever he wants. Show a complete circus. The child should feel that he's done something fantastic and amazing by swallowing that 1 measly teaspoon of meat stock. And then you let him go. You let him leave the situation just after 1 teaspoon. 3-4 minutes later, we sit down again, another teaspoon. And we go on like that the whole day until 1 teaspoon is not a problem anymore. The child is learning a new game, new rules of life, basically, that I can't leave the table, I can't get what I want, they're not listening to my tantrums, they're not listening to my screams and cries and kicking and screaming and other misbehaviors, they're ignoring all of that. They continue smiling manically, and they would not let me leave the table. So I better swallow that spoonful. So he learns the new rules of the game. And then once the 1 teaspoon is not a problem, we move to 2 teaspoons, then to 3 teaspoons. So following this protocol, you can teach hippopotamus to eat soup.
Wow.
And once the first food is conquered, we introduce the second food and then the third food. And by then the child understood the rules of the game. It's much easier to introduce the second food and the third food. And before you know it, your child will be eating lamb chops and pork chops with vegetables and liver and fish and not even blink an eye. I love it.
That's amazing.
That's how it works.
This is so helpful. This is so helpful that you laid it out for everyone. I feel like I know most adults who need this. Can we do this protocol for adults? Because most people in society need this type of exercise.
Obviously, with adults, it's more difficult to contain them physically.
Well, man, if we could get, if we could get everyone reset.
Do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not saying people don't need to do this forever, but so many people out there would be life-changing. It would turn around the whole world, the health of the world, if people could go through this type of protocol, get their guts fixed, get put back together, and then go on from there. It would never happen, it would never happen, but it's interesting to think about. So, oh man, we have to go back. So meat and the difference between meat stock and bone broth. So bone broth is, 48 hours. It's a long, slow thing. Meat stock, we're talking just a couple hours. And if you could talk about that, just a quick difference between those two.
Meat stock, bone broth is the poor man's meat stock. It's made out of bare bones, which were left from previous meals, which you accumulate in the freezer or wherever else, and then you put them in a slow cooker, use some vinegar or another acid like lemon, to leach calcium out of the bones, and leave it for several days, minimum 24 hours. That's bone broth. It has a very different composition and a different taste. Meat stock is made with a joint of animal, literally a chunk of animal, which unfortunately in the Western world is not that easy to find, which is surprising. Mm-hmm. Butchers in the Western world have been turned into some kind of, vivisectionists. The way they're trained to dissect and remove the muscle and remove everything else out. Just leave the lean muscle. No. Eating a lean muscle on its own, without fat, without blood vessels, nerves, ligaments, fascias, collagen, whatever else is around the skin, around that muscle, is harmful to the human body. You have to eat all of that in one chunk all together. That's how Mother Nature designed it. That is why it is best to work with your butcher and instruct your butcher to cut the carcass for you in a certain way. And it's very simple. You just cut a chunk of the animal with everything in it, and preferably skin on top too, if it's pork.
Yeah.
Or another animal that's eaten with the skin. And you take the whole joint, you take the whole piece of that with a bone inside, or preferably even a joint inside of the animal. You put it in a pan, you fill it up with water, salt, pepper, and you cook it for about 3 to 5 hours. If it's chicken stock, 2 hours are enough. You put a whole chicken in there. You don't have to cut it into pieces. If you want to cut it into pieces, it's up to you. And all the giblets need to be there, and the feet, and the neck, and the head, the whole thing. And you cook it for a couple of hours. If it's fish, 1 hour is enough. And fish must have skin and head and skeleton and tail and fins, the
Eyes.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Eyes, everything, nothing removed. The skin should be descaled. That's very important, because then we can eat the skin, because the skin contains the most nourishing and valuable nutrients to rebuild the gut wall. So the skin of the fish is very, very valuable. That is why it's very important to descale the fish before cooking it. So, but if it's pork, if it's beef, if it's goat or lamb, 4 hours, 3 hours, you just cook it on a slow. That is the liquid that results from it. It's called meat stock. It's clear, it's delicious, it smells beautiful, it's lovely to drink, and it's lovely to make soup from. And it has a different nutritional composition to the bone broth. Bone broth can be used in the GAPS protocol, but quite a bit later in the program, because it's very rich in glutamic acid. People with mental illnesses react to bone broth. People with histamine intolerance and with other immune problems react, and many other people react to bone broth. So bone broth can be used quite a little bit later when enough healing happened in the digestive tract of the person to tolerate bone broth. Meat stock is has a very different nutritional composition, and is tolerated much, much better by people. And it's very healing. And it produces not only liquid, it produces a joint of meat for you, which is delicious to eat as it is. You have a whole meal. You have the meat, which you strip off the bones, you bang the bone marrow out. That's a very valuable source of nutrients, must be eaten. And you can put vegetables into that stock, make a soup. Or you can drink the stock as a drink with your meal, with your meat, and cook vegetables on the side.
It's a beautiful, harmonious cycle, way of eating that nature provides us with everything. This has come up on recent podcasts a lot, where you're talking about just eating the muscle meat and not eating the rest. That if you get down to the scientific level, you're getting all this methionine, and you're not getting the glycine and all the other things. Like, you're basically just getting an imbalance. And so many people do that. They just want the chicken breast. They just want the filet mignon. They're not getting all the rest of the nutrients. And there are rodent studies that show that it's harmful if you're just eating the muscle meat and not getting the rest of the parts.
Absolutely. So everything that nature puts into a particular piece of food for you is essential. Nothing should be dissected and removed. Everything should be consumed. And
100%.
That's a chunk of animal. Yeah.
The chunk. And also at Nose to Tail, we do that. I mean, my whole company is called Nose to Tail, so we definitely don't just dissect it out. We have packs of chicken feet, heads. We have the bones, the carcass. We have everything. So we have all these broth packs that you can get, and it's all, pasture raised, like it should be. So I want to go back to autism, because it's super, I don't know if it's controversial. It's because to me it's not. I've heard about this for so long. I know the success of it, but I want to just hear of your specific success. You've been, in practice for decades. I just want to know, and for the audience, how many people have you helped? Have you seen, reversal of autism? What is, what's going on with these patients?
Nobody's counting any numbers. Nobody's doing that research, how many children actually recovered. But I say my first book, Gut and Psychology Syndrome, which focuses on autism, has been translated into 24 languages around the world. We have thousands and thousands of certified GAPS practitioners, all of whom work with thousands of clients all over the world. And the protocol has been around for 20 years. So millions of people around the world, literally millions of people around the world, are following the GAPS nutritional protocol and getting fantastic results. And not all of them would contact us and tell us about the results. People just recover and get on with their normal lives. But at every conference, wherever I am, I meet people all the time who come to me and just to say hello quietly, and they say, well, our daughter has recovered from epilepsy, or our son recovered from schizophrenia, or our child recovered from autism. We've recovered from ADHD. We've recovered from depression, from Hashimoto, from multiple sclerosis, from all of these things. And these people never wrote to anyone, and they never had any consultations with anyone. They just bought my book, they followed the protocol, and because the whole protocol is in the books. It's everything's there in the book, and there's lots of extra information online. So people follow it and they get results.
Oh, I've seen it. I've met these people. I've been to these conferences. I did a little video actually at one of these conferences with a woman who was in a wheelchair because of MS. She had multiple sclerosis, in a wheelchair. She couldn't lift anything. She was walking around. She was doing great. She was completely on the road to full recovery from the GAPS protocol. And yeah, I mean, I've heard personally dozens and dozens of people just throughout the last 4 years of me just making my film. So I am 100% on board with you. And also our mutual friend, Mary Ruddick, we talked about her. I'm actually going to go see her in Mexico tomorrow morning. And
Mary is quite a story. She has quite a story to tell.
I've had her on twice to tell her story and everything, and then actually 4 more short episodes after we went to Africa together. So people who are listening can go back to the 2 first episodes with Mary to hear her story. But she continues to kind of work with you, or what does she do exactly?
She's a GAPS practitioner, certified GAPS practitioner. So she has her clients. I think she works online largely because her clients are international, and she gets wonderful results. She also is very active in the postgraduate platform that we have for our practitioners, where she gives lectures and gives extra information because she has a lot of experience. And it is beautiful to see. Over the years, as we've been training practitioners, these young people come in, and most of them have a personal story. They got involved in the first place with GAPS because they were ill themselves, or they had some tragedy in the family, some member of the family needed help. So they get involved, and then they recover, and then they start working with the clients, and then they gain clinical experience, and then they start teaching themselves, and they have their own pupils, and they have their own disciples, and it's just a beautiful process that is happening around the world. So many people, and I say nobody's counting, so I can't give you any numbers. Really.
Well, it's a movement. I know it's a whole movement, and yeah, you can never count. And yeah, I'm sure it'll never be tallied or really even recognized by the mainstream medical system because it's just kind of going opposite to everything that they're saying. And well, let's just jump into what it is, because people are probably curious who haven't heard of it. Like, what is the GAPS protocol and how does it start? I know there's the real foundational healing one in the very beginning, and then it can sort of expand from there.
Most important element of it is the diet, of course, because remember, we're dealing with a microbial community. Human body is an ecosystem. It's a microbial community. And what is the most powerful influence on any microbial community in nature? Food. Bar none, period. Food. Nothing comes even close to the effect of food. Mm-hmm. So you change what you eat, and you will change your whole microbial community in the body. And because majority of you are microbes, you change the microbes, and that changes you. Changes your body, changes what you're made of, the very essence, the very stuffing of you changes. And as a result, you start thinking differently. Your brain starts functioning differently. Your personality changes. You just get filled with light and joy and love, and you become a very different person. There is spiritual growth in it. You grow spiritually, you change mentally, you change physically, you change on every dimension, on every level. It's a transformation. So the whole thing is absolutely transformational because we are spiritual beings. The body is only a vehicle that we use to live in this dimension, in this physical dimension. We are eternal spiritual beings working through this body. And this body has been designed to match this physical dimension. So there are rules how this body is supposed to be handled and managed. Problem is, we human beings have created a very unhealthy society with unhealthy food, unhealthy agricultural practices, unhealthy medical industry, unhealthy global monopolists, unhealthy big pharma, just unhealthy psychological environment, unhealthy mental ideas, unhealthy toxic thoughts. It's just everything. It just seems it's difficult to accept initially as you start understanding this, particularly it's the parents of autistic children in particular that understand it and start understanding it. That pretty much everything in this society, particularly in the Western world, is designed to destroy your child from the moment of conception, literally, from the moment of conception. So you live in a hostile world, which acts through pretending to be very comfortable and nice and pretty. When you dig deeper, when you scratch off the veneer, everything underneath it is destructive. So you have to fight all of that. In order to protect your child, you have to be a real parent in our modern world. You do have to think about your child from the moment of before conception. A young couple nowadays cannot just go ahead and get pregnant. That's not going to bring anything good, because your body is full of toxins. You are likely to have abnormal gut flora. You're likely to have stored lots of toxic metals in your body. You're likely to have lots of wrong ideas in your mind. Your mind is full of rubbish and misconceptions and lies, mainstream lies. There's no other word for it. You have to cleanse all that out. You have to clean your physical bodies before you even conceive, in order to have a healthy child. And then you have to protect your child and protect your child and protect your child and create the environment, the right environment for your child to be healthy. Because the environment is extremely important. We are not separate from our environment. We are continuous with our environment. And that's what GAPS Nutritional Protocol does. Not only it fixes your microbial community in the body, brings it back to that original design, divine design, the way human body is supposed to function and supposed to be, in order to be a good vehicle for light, for health, for joy, for love, for a being that is full of joy and enjoys this experience. That's the only way. If the body is sick and full of toxicity, you're not going to enjoy the experience. Your life is not going to be joyful. It's going to be dark and miserable and full of trials and tribulations. In order to enjoy this life and be full of light and be of a joyful nature, you have to have a vehicle that is clean and is functioning properly, so you can drive it properly and enjoy it, the whole thing. And that's what GAPS Nutritional Protocol does. It also changes agriculture, because we exclude all grains, we exclude a lot of starchy vegetables, we focus largely on properly reared animal products. Proper meat, proper fish, eggs and dairy, properly prepared from proper animals, not hybrids of animals, real natural animals or natural organic pasture. The same with birds, with pigs, with any other farm animal. Many families that went through the GAPS Nutritional Protocol become farmers. I'm a farmer myself. I'm an organic farmer. For the last 9 years, I've been running an organic farm. We produce all of our own food for my family and for many volunteers that come on my farm. So that was a very joyful and wonderful learning curve. Learning how, because I wasn't a farmer, we had no experience in this, so we've learned an awful lot. So at a certain point, it is a spiritual evolution of the whole family. People start with a family that is sick and has dysfunctional children, and the parents are dysfunctional, and everybody is addicted to something industrial and processed, and finishing up being healthy and joyful and becoming farmers and start taking pieces of land that have been destroyed by industry and transforming them into regenerative agriculture, regenerating pieces of land, producing their own food. That is an enormous, huge transformation for the whole family. And the more of these little farms we have on our planet, the more hope our planet has. No scale is too small.
You're speaking my language. This is what I'm getting into now. That's why I moved to Texas. There is a natural progression where people see this and they start heading this direction. They see the success of changing their diet, and then they move to, now I want to go get foods from my farmer. and the farmer's market. Then they will go, I want to get my own chicken. Next thing you know, they have their own land outside the city and they're growing their own food. That's so cool. Can you tell us, though, the actual diet? So you start with, it's kind of like an animal-based diet, right, in the very beginning?
We eat vegetables, of course, but no starch. Starch is not allowed on the GAPS diet because starch is a very large molecule. Under the microscope, very difficult to digest. In fact, most starch goes undigested in human beings, and it just becomes food for microbes. Problem with starch and fiber, and the mainstream will be tooting starch and fiber for you forever, telling you how wonderful they are and how good they are for your gut flora. Problem with these molecules, fiber and starch, is that they feed equally the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a balanced, beautiful, harmonious gut flora, then starch and fiber may be good for you because they will feed that flora and allow it to thrive, and it will grow bigger and stronger and make you healthy and well as a result. Problem is that in the majority of people, particularly in the Western world, their gut flora is damaged. Mm-hmm. It's unbalanced, it's unharmonious. Pathogens are ruling that place. So it's these pathogens that will feast on your starch and your fiber. They will grow bigger and stronger, and they will make you sick as a result very quickly. That is why until we recover the gut in a person, starch and fiber have to be out. Mm-hmm. Not all fiber, we keep fiber from the vegetables, of course, but all starchy vegetables, that is potato family, largely. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, yams, Jerusalem artichokes, cassava and other starchy vegetables. All grains, because of starch, and most beans and legumes have to be out. They're all very difficult to digest because they're seeds. Mm-hmm. GAPS diet has several variations. There is the GAPS introduction diet, which is one of the most difficult forms of the diet to follow, but it achieves the deepest healing and the quickest healing for a person. There is the full GAPS diet, which is the easiest to follow because it has the full list of allowed foods in it. It achieves a lot of healing, and many people just follow the full GAPS diet and recover. But for those more severe cases, we do need to go into more strict forms of the GAPS diet. We have a no plant GAPS diet where no plant matter is allowed at all. This the reason why I've designed this form of GAPS diet, no plant, when we live entirely on animal products. We live on meats, fish, eggs, and dairy. Not a leaf, not a speck of anything from plant kingdom is consumed because plants are difficult to digest for human beings, and they do not feed the human body. Their purpose is to cleanse us. They are incapable of providing building blocks for your gut lining, for your brain, for your lungs, for your heart, for anything else in your body. Plants are not feeding foods, they are cleansing foods. The only foods that truly feed our bodies, which provide the right building materials to maintain that physical structure of the vehicle you live in, only animal foods are capable of providing those. They provide the right quality protein, the right quality fats to build your physical body. Because if you look at the physical body of the human being, by weight, about 70% is water. When we remove water, what's left, the dry weight, is 50-50, protein and fat. When we analyze human protein and fat in a laboratory, we find that in a biochemical composition, they are almost identical, very similar, to proteins and fats in meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. So only these foods are capable of maintaining your physical structure. Plants have plenty of proteins, plenty of fats, but in their biochemical composition, they're completely inappropriate for building your protein and your fat. They are indigestible. The most researched protein from plants is gluten. The more we research gluten, the more we discover that nobody can digest it. It damages everybody. And the proportion of people, many people don't react, particularly older generations with their stronger constitution. But younger generations, a very large proportion of people are now on gluten-free diets because they know they're reacting. They cannot digest that protein. And that's just one protein from plant matter. There are many other proteins. There's a myriad of proteins in plants. And the more we're researching them, the more we're discovering that they all damage the human body and they're all indigestible. And none of them can be used by the human body to build your protein. While the protein from meats, fish, eggs, and dairy goes directly and easily, just flows through your digestive system and builds your physical structure. So, the more the digestive system of a person is damaged, the less they're capable of managing plant matter. The more they have to remove plant matter. And I started with a group of children with FPIES. That's a new syndrome that appeared in the last 10 years, and there are variations now, and it's an absolute epidemic coming upon humanity. These are babies, exclusively breastfed babies, vomiting diarrhea. The child is not gaining any weight, the child is dying, not digesting anything. Doctors do tests, find that the child is allergic to every protein on the planet, so breastfeeding stops, the child is put on synthetic formula, usually made out of soya, elemental formula, and the parents are told that they can't give the child anything containing protein at all. These children, if they follow that mainstream route, they finish up with severe physical and mental disability, or they simply die. They don't survive. So I had the first few mothers who contacted me with these babies. I had no experience. We had to think what to do. So I've removed all plant matter because I knew that the digestive system in these babies is so damaged to such a degree, it cannot tolerate any amount of plant matter at all. We put them purely on meat stock, gelatinous meat stocks, proper gelatinous meat stocks, and egg yolks and kefir, fermented dairy products. And the diarrhea and vomiting continued for a few days, but then it started reducing, and then the child started producing normal stools, and then we started gaining weight, and the rest is history. The difficult part came when we tried to reintroduce plant matter to these children. I had children who could not reintroduce plant matter for 6-8 years. They continued living on this no plant gaps diet. Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, beautiful development, intelligent, healthy children. These children taught me that human beings can live perfectly well without plants. Perfectly well. Beautifully developing, healthy, strong children with such a difficult start in their lives. But human beings cannot live without animal products. Absolutely cannot live without them. So veganism, a regimen when a person lives entirely on plants, is not a diet. It is a form of fasting. This is not my idea. This was explained to me by Hindu pilgrims in India, who for 35,000 years traveled to their sacred sites, and part of their pilgrimage is a 42-day fast. And I've asked them in India, I said, what kind of fast is it? What are you allowed to eat? And basically what they described to me as their Hindu fast is a Western vegan diet. They call it a fast. They say it's very difficult, and they would never follow it longer than 42 days. Because veganism is not a diet. It does not feed your body to any degree. It provides a large amount of cleansing, no doubt, because plants are cleansers. That is their purpose. They have powerful phytonutrients, antioxidants, phenols, salicylates, and various other substances which clean you on the inside, remove toxins, cleanse you very nicely, but they are incapable of providing building materials to build your body, to feed you. They're not feeding foods. So people who are toxic, people who are overweight, who have accumulated too much toxicity in their body, to do a fast like that might be useful, but no longer for a couple of months, no longer than a couple of months. And at a certain point when the body finished cleansing, it will give you a signal. I finished cleansing now, I need feeding, please feed me. The way the body will give you a signal like that, it will give you a desire for a piece of meat, for a roast chicken, for a bacon, for fried eggs, for a pot of cream, for something like that. Problem is, many people in our world become vegans for political reasons, religious reasons, emotional reasons, and other reasons. They do not listen to their body. They override the signal and force the body to continue cleansing when it needs feeding. And that is the time when the body has no choice but to start breaking down less important tissues, such as muscle and bone, to feed your brain, feed your heart, your lungs, your liver, and other life-sustaining organs. So you start losing muscle, you start losing bone density, and if the whole situation continues, you start developing chronic illness. Long-term vegans usually develop cancers, blood problems, and neurological illnesses. So that's the no plant diet. That's what took me into the whole sort of journey like that. And from there are some other forms of GAPS diet that evolved. So every person can choose for themselves what they want to follow. But practically for everybody, I recommend to start from the full GAPS diet, because it's the easiest form of GAPS diet to follow. Get yourself in first, go through all your addictions, cravings, get into that groove. You will achieve a lot of healing. And then maybe a year later, a year down the road of being on the full GAPS diet, you need deeper healing. There are some stubborn symptoms that haven't quite gone. Then you can do the introduction diet, or even maybe a no-plant diet, or another form of GAPS diet.
Oh, yeah. This is so interesting because I've seen these vegans, and a lot of people know they call it the honeymoon phase too. They'll eat the vegan diet, and like you said, they were toxic. They had many problems, inflammation, all this stuff, and they went on a cleanse, in quotes. They ate the vegan diet, and they did feel better. Of course, yes, you can lose weight. You can, yeah.
A clean body feels better than a toxic one, and that usually happens in the first few weeks of the vegan regimen. But then at a certain point, the cleansing completes itself, and the body needs to be fed. And that's a very important time to listen to your body and to reintroduce animal foods.
Absolutely.
I wrote a book on this subject. Another book.
Another book.
Another book, that's right, called Vegetarianism Explained, where I explain all of this, that animal products feed the human body, plants cleanse the human body. And
It's important.
how it all works in the human body.
It's so important. I mean, yeah, this is so great because basically everything you've said today is kind of reinforcing and reiterating everything that I've done in the last 4 years with 140 episodes and all the doctors and scientists. You've touched on the environment side and the animals and the land and the gut and obesity and addiction and plants versus animals. It's so helpful to have you here and explain everything and wrap it all up and kind of just show everyone that you've seen this. You've worked with so many thousands of people, and through your practitioners, thousands and millions of people. And so back to plants, yeah, it seems like they were fallback foods, right, throughout history. They were there if we failed to get the animal in the hunt. And so they could sustain us for a little while. Or they could be used as medicine, like cleansing. Or they could be used as a garnish, or I mean, it's great. They taste great, if you have them on the side, if you prepare them properly. Right?
You have to think logically. If you find yourself in the middle of a winter, let's say in Canada or North USA or here in the UK, and you're in the wild, there are no supermarkets. There is nowhere to get food. You try to find any plant matter suitable for eating.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. You can choose on some branches from the trees. You can try to dig some roots, and they're chewy and taste awful and will not give you any nourishment whatsoever. There are no plants to eat at all. But if you manage to catch an animal, you will live. You'll survive, and very nicely too. Thank you very much. And that's how people lived for millions of years on this planet. Vegetables are a modern human invention. Even a couple of generations ago, people didn't eat vegetables. They grew potatoes. Maybe they would grow some carrots and beetroot, some other root vegetables that would keep. But lettuce or any other modern
kale.
vegetable.
What about kale? The superfood.
Kale, exactly. There's nothing super about it. These vegetables that treated as the whatever, That is completely unsustainable. Completely and entirely, and humanity, for most of its existence on the planet, lived without them perfectly well. Because the essential foods to eat are animal foods, and you can live entirely on them. If you get some plants to add for flavor, for color, for beauty, for variety, lovely. If you don't have access to plant matter, don't worry about it. You don't need them.
It's such a good message. Yeah, you're not saying, you're not like a carnivore zealot saying you can only eat animal foods. You're just kind of explaining the truth of the matter. But what I want to know, a little devil's advocate, is, well, for one, I should say, I have met some long-term vegans, and I've had meetups around the country, and they have every problem you can imagine. There's this girl who would eat like 1,000 calories a day and was obese and had 10 different problems, every problem under the sun, because she was raised vegan. So I'm not trying to support vegans, but I do see some of these guys online, especially the really hardcore athletes who are using all the supplements and the shakes, and they're taking like 10, pea protein shakes, and they seem to be okay. So how is that possible?
Well, let me tell you a story. I had this client, a young man from Edinburgh, who came and told me, said, I've never told this to anyone. Please don't tell anyone. You're the first person I'm sharing this with. He said, I was a vegan for 4 months, and I was walking along the streets of Edinburgh, spreading leaflets about veganism, and the smell of roasted chicken wafted out of a shop. He said, I went in some kind of trance. I walked into the shop, I bought the whole chicken. I came outside, I sat on the ground, and I ate the whole chicken. And then I came out of this trance, and I was so ashamed of myself. So he said, I've never told anyone about this. I kept it as my little secret. That's what happened. This was the first person. Then another person told me the same story, then another person. And then I met a lady who says that her friend is writing a book about this phenomenon. Long-term vegans have periods of bulimia when they feast on animal foods. And it is done in some kind of trance, which they happy to forget, and they never tell anyone about this little dirty secret. Because when your body is starved, truly starving, it will switch off your conscious mind and force you to eat animal foods. Once you've satisfied your body, it received its nutrient fill, then your conscious mind will come back and you can continue with your veganism. Every long-term vegan has this problem. That is why you will meet vegans who will tell you, oh, I've been a vegan 25 years, look at me, kind of thing. They all cheat.
I've
not be conscious cheat, but that's what it is.
I've heard this over the years, that even like people didn't divulge names, but they heard famous vegan doctors who would buy like farm-raised salmon, or not farm-raised, like really good wild salmon, and they'd eat it once a month. And yeah, so animal foods, a little can go a long way. They're so bioavailable and so nutritious that you can eat a couple oysters. Yeah,
exactly. And we all have different constitutions. We're all very different. If you genetically come from a stock, from northern stock somewhere, from North Europe, cold climates, then chances are you need to eat a lot of meat and fat. Because the colder the weather, the more meat and fat you need to survive. The warmer the climate, the hotter the climate, the less animal foods you need, the more you can sustain yourself with plant matter. So if your genetic stock your heredity comes from somewhere equatorial, somewhere hot and tropical, you can sustain yourself on rice and beans for quite a long time, just eating meats occasionally, and you'll be all right. But the same diet will not be suitable for somebody from a North European stock.
and would it be optimal even? What if the equatorial person ate more animal foods and less of the rice and beans?
It depends on where they are. It depends on what climate they live in. Maybe they evolved in equatorial Africa somewhere, but finished up living in Toronto or somewhere else like that. It depends on the weather. When the weather's cold, we need more meat and fat to survive the cold. When it's a hot summer, cold salads is lovely for everybody. Your body will thank you for it. You'll be all right. You don't need to eat that much animal foods. So it depends on the weather. It depends on your stress level. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on your hormonal balance, on the stage in your life. Women are cyclical creatures. So every month they go through a cycle. So to understand all of that, I have a chapter in most of my books, which is called One Man's Meat is Another Man's Poison, where I explain how to design your own diet, which is specific for you. Because you are a unique individual. Unique. You're not like anybody else. So just following anybody's prescription can do you a lot of harm because you are different than other people. So we have to, every one of us, has to reconnect to our own senses, to listen to our body, because the body is constantly sending you messages what it needs, of its needs. And if we learn to listen to those messages, we will have an absolutely perfect diet, every one of us. You just watch a dog or a cat. Will they ever put anything into their mouth unless they've smelt it thoroughly? They use their senses all the time. And that I'm talking about a proper cat and dog, not the ones grown on food, which is laced with addictive chemicals. That's why they eat this rubbish. It's got addictive, they're addicts, they're drug addicts. That's why they eat those pellets in the first place. No, a cat and a dog that lives on mice and rats and natural raw meat and raw fish, the way they're designed by nature. They would smell everything, because sense of smell gives us a lot of information about the food and about our bodily needs at that particular moment. So please read those chapters and understand how to design your own diet.
That's good. And then what about like fruit and honey? Because you say starches and they have a different reaction in our gut, but some people find fruit and honey as a good source of carbs.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful. They're delicious as long as they are eaten in season from your own tree and your own garden, not from a supermarket. Altogether, we human beings must abandon supermarkets. I know this sounds very controversial for many people, because supermarkets are stocked by industrial agriculture. Everything industrial agriculture epitomizes, the energy of it is suffering, pain, and grief, and chemicals. That is what you're buying in a supermarket. No matter how nicely it's packaged, no matter how pretty it looks, no matter how deceptively it's labeled. And about 10 years ago, the Big Ag realized that organic agriculture is becoming popular. People want cleaner food. So they wanted a piece of that pie. And because they control agricultural policies of the Western governments, they put their own people into agricultural departments of Western governments. They write the policies. They've changed all organic standards in the Western world. We now have organic pesticides and practices which have no place in true organics. So the Big Ag got on the big wagon, on the organic wagon. So you cannot trust organic label anymore in a supermarket. You cannot trust it.
Yeah, no, I know.
Waste your money. We need to get out of supermarket mentality. We need to stop going to those terribly toxic places at all. Go to your local farmers markets. Make contact with the farmers. Get their contact details. On the weekend, put your family in the car, your dog in the car, and go and visit the farm. And buy directly. Find several farms like that and start buying directly from these people. What I recommend, because real organic farmer, has nothing to hide. He'll be happy to welcome you to visit his farm, see his animals, see what he's doing. And you look in the eye of this person. Can you trust this person? Is this a loving, kind, good person? Does he love his animals? Do his chickens look happy? Do his pigs look happy? Do his animals look happy? Does his land look happy? What's the energy of the whole place? And then your body, your heart will tell you, I want the food from this person.
So
exactly. These kind of people their lives are made very difficult by Western governments. Western governments subsidize industrial agriculture. Give them money, while making life for a real, true organic farmers very difficult with their idiotic regulations and meddling. So the only good farmers that survive are the ones which have a strong customer base when they sell directly to people. So by supporting a farmer like that, you're giving a livelihood to a good person who loves his land and loves his soil and his animals and his birds. And at the same time, you're providing the best quality food for yourself. So what I do with my clients who live in a city, I tell them to find these kind of farms and I put them in touch with each other. So they form little cooperative, little groups. So 1 week, one family goes out of the city and brings food for the whole group. so the rest of the group can come into their apartment and pick up their bits and pieces. Next week, somebody else can do that chore for everybody. And when the group becomes big enough, the farmers are happy to deliver to one place in the city for the whole group. So all it takes is a little organization, getting organized to get truly good food for your family. And it's cheaper that way, believe me.
You're speaking my language. This is the project I'm working on. You have a wonderful solution that people can start now. We're trying to see if we can make this, give the people the organization that you're talking about, and have nodes or hubs around the country, or organize people, at least provide a website for people to interact on. So we're just getting that up. It's called sovereignhumans.org. So we're going to try. We want everyone's help because we don't even know what it is. I put out a call on social media and I got over 600 emails. And so people are interested in this. People are very interested in exactly what you're talking about. We're going to do it. We don't know what it is. We have different models. We're going to try to start one outside Austin. Like I was saying, the food and the community needs to be decentralized. It's kind of like opting out of the system. You're talking about opting out. We're talking about being humans, right? How do you be a human?
Small is beautiful. The more of these small farms we have, the better quality we will have. And our land is abundant. The amount of food that my little small holding produces, I could feed I don't know how many people. We have so much food. Our problem is not shortage. Our problem is how to consume all of it.
That's amazing. Well, that's exactly.
So much is produced. Yeah, and it's easy once you know what you're doing. Once you've learned all the ropes, and as long as you make sure that everyone's happy on your farm, everyone must be happy, from a microbe in your soil, to your chickens, to your animals, to your plants in the garden, and to you, and to all the humans. If you make sure that everyone's happy, the whole place will sing. It will be a beautiful symphony, and the food that you will produce will be charged with that energy. It will bring you healing, and it will bring you love.
That's how nature.
Food can never do that.
Yeah, that's how nature works. It's so harmonious, and it's fractal. Like I love what you're talking about, the fractal nature of just the gut microbiome, the soil, the humans, and down at the smallest level, it's still the same thing. Everyone needs the same thing, is a natural balance. You're talking about balance. You're talking about the complex systems that happen, and everything we're doing in the modern society is breaking the balance and breaking those systems on the smallest level to the biggest level. Even just living in cities is the biggest level of breaking that balance.
Yes.
But
humanity has to learn very heavy lessons, and that's what we're doing. And the lessons are becoming more and more acute, and harsher and harsher. But that pushes humanity to learning them and to realizing things and moving on a higher level, I guess, of spiritual development.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. I have one last thing. We have to cover dairy before we go. We did not cover dairy because so many people are confused by dairy. There's all these confusing studies that show, they try to show that it's inflammatory, this and that. Well, it all depends on what dairy we're talking about, right? It all depends on what dairy we're talking about.
Absolutely. Last century, in the 60s and 70s, the industrial agriculture was not happy with the amount of milk a normal cow is able to produce. They wanted more milk because industrial agriculture is based on greed. Capitalism is greed. The whole world, all the global corporations are greed personified. And greed is never ending. It's never satisfied. It cannot be satisfied. So the scientists got to work, and they selected animals which had pituitary adenomas. They had brain tumors, brain cancer. And because of this brain cancer, they were producing too much growth hormone, and as a result, they were producing too much milk. So they selected these sick animals, and from them they bred this new breed of cow called Holstein Friesian, this enormous black and white cow, which produces 3 times more milk than a natural cow is able to produce. These animals are Frankenstein animals. They're not real animals. They cannot be just on grass. You see, Mother Nature designed cows to live only on grass, exclusively on grass. You don't need to feed the cow unless you're milking her every day. Then you give her a few vegetables and perhaps some sprouted grain or fermented grain, as a boost to replenish her so she doesn't lose too much weight. But these animals cannot live on grass alone or anything natural like that. They have to be fed chemicals, they have to be fed artificial feeds and all sorts of things. They are sick all the time. About 75% of them have mastitis at any time. So a lot of pus goes into their milk and a lot of infection goes into their milk. They usually, by the age of 5, they're usually infertile and develop cancers and are killed. So how a sick animal can give you healthy milk? All dairy products and the milk in our supermarkets come from this breed of cow. A sick animal can only give you sick milk. And I have a stack full of papers that thick showing, scientific papers, that this milk causes every disease under the sun, from cancer to autoimmunity to allergies to lactose intolerance to anything, mental illnesses, anything at all. And it's true because these are Frankenstein animals. They produce Frankenstein milk, which causes disease. Mother Nature created very different animals. The animals that Mother Nature has created have to live on pasture. They have to eat, and it has to be real pasture, with more than 60, 70 varieties of herbs and grasses growing in a community, growing in a mixture, with no chemicals applied at all. And these animals are under the sun all the time. My cow lives 24 hours, the whole year round, under the sun. She doesn't go inside at all. And because the sun shines on her skin, her milk and cream is full of vitamin D, sunshine vitamin. We don't need to get vitamin D supplements or anything else. Even cod liver oil we don't take because she provides us with all of that. And so do our chickens who are in the sunshine outside all day long. And if the sun is shining, their egg yolks will have vitamin D in their sunshine vitamin. So that is we want a natural breed of cow or goat or any other animal that we're milking on real pasture, under the sunlight. And we milk only once a day. We don't over milk the animal. You get a reasonable amount of milk, but perhaps not enough for a greedy industrial farmer who wants lots of milk and lots of profit. So that is the kind of dairy, exactly. That is the kind of milk that human beings need to consume. Milk of any animal is alive. It's the white blood of the animal. And that includes human beings. Your milk, human milk, is the white blood of the mother with red blood cells and some other elements removed. So like any blood of any animal, it's alive. It has a flowing energy in it. It has alive microbes. It's a microbial community in the first place. It's got lots of probiotic good microbes in it. It's got alive and active immune cells, active enzymes, active hormones, active neurotransmitters, and a myriad of all sorts of other things. It's a matrix. It's a plasma, full of energy, full of potential, full of life. And that was what the baby gets. When we milk a cow and we have her milk fresh, without adulterating it, without doing anything to it whatsoever, we drink that living plasma. And it gives us beautiful health and vitality and energy, and it just heals. It is the most beautiful, beautiful product. But if you pasteurize it, you kill it. It becomes a dead product. The first thing that happens, everybody becomes lactose intolerant. Lactose is a milk sugar, and every molecule of a lactose in a fresh raw milk is accompanied by an enzyme called lactase to digest that lactose. They come together as a package. Pasteurization destroys that enzyme. So lactose is not accompanied anymore, and everybody suddenly becomes lactose intolerant. On top of that, you get dead stuff. You get dead immune cells, dead microbes, destroyed hormones, destroyed enzymes, destroyed neurotransmitters, destroyed everything else. And the energy is destroyed in that milk. You're getting pollution, basically, into your body. So milk of any animal needs to be raw, unpasteurized. Of course, the animal needs to be milked in hygienic conditions because any milk can be contaminated after it left the cow. If the cow was milked in dirty conditions and into dirty vessels or whatever else. So it needs to be done in a hygienic way, and the milk should not be pasteurized, should not be adulterated. In the GAPS diet, we start from fermented milk. We always ferment it. We do not drink milk as it is because of lactose. Despite the fact that there is lactase in it, GAPS people have too many pathogenic microbes in the gut which will love to lap up that lactose and grow and thrive. So we ferment the milk. First, we produce kefir, yogurt, cheese, whey. That's what I'm drinking here, by the way. It's whey from my goats. It's a beautiful medicine for any stomach problems, for any digestive problem. So that is what we start from, because the process of fermentation not only makes the milk lactose free, it pre-digests the milk. It breaks down casein, albumin, and other proteins which may be problematic, particularly for autistic children, schizophrenics, and other patients. Fermentation process breaks them up. So autistic individuals can start with these kind of dairy products without any problems.
Kefir, yogurt, what are you talking about?
Yogurt, homemade, needs to be fermented for 24 hours. So we start from that for a few years, and then when enough healing happened in the digestive system, the person is out of the woods quite seriously, then we can gradually start introducing raw milk without fermentation. And I know many recovered autistic individuals who drink lots of raw milk, and beautifully, they feel very well in it and do very well.
This has been enlightening. It was one of my favorite interviews. We've covered so much. We're almost at 2 hours, so we have to cut ourselves off. I wish I could, ask you some more questions. You grew up it was the USSR at the time.
That's right.
You went to medical school back then. I guess maybe just give us a quick little glimpse into what it was like. Especially, did they have all this anti-meat sentiment? We have, our medical system is so off. Everything is backwards. Was it different?
Well, you see, the impression that the Western world was given about the Soviet Union is very negative. I grew up with a lot of positives. Everything we're human beings are very complex creatures, and everything in the world that we create has maybe 50-50 of good and bad in it. And if you focus only on the bad, then you don't see the good. Soviet Union had a lot of good. And as a child, I have received all that good. So I'm extremely fortunate and grateful to my life and to my destiny that I was born in the Soviet Union and I grew up there. It was a beautiful country in many, many ways. It had many good things which the Western world can't even dream of.
Were you just eating natural foods? What's the synopsis?
Everything was organic. There were no chemicals. There was no food industry. The food was fresh.
Decentralized. It was decentralized.
Exactly. We had kolkhozes, which were collective farms where people worked. They had many problems, of course. The economy didn't quite work well in the Soviet Union because of human nature, the way human nature works. But nobody was hungry. Nobody was starving. Everybody was nourished very well. And all food was very natural and unprocessed. We had no processed foods at all. None. We had no breakfast cereals. We never heard of such a thing. We never had soft drinks. Never heard of such a thing. We never had any of those cans and snacks. And that is why the shelves in our grocery stores looked empty. Because they had only natural things, unadulterated and unprocessed. That's all we had. Everybody cooked at home. Everybody followed a fairly natural, very natural traditional diet. And most people had their dachas. Dacha in the Soviet Union was a cultural thing. Everybody was allocated a piece of land. All city people outside the city had a piece of land, about an acre. Every family was given for free. So the cities, starting from April until the end of the harvest, every weekend cities were empty. Everybody were out on their dachas, planting, harvesting, weeding, watering, whatever people grew on their vegetable plots, and everybody were busy. And then your back will ache for 2-3 days when you're back at work on Monday. And people will come with sort of red noses and red faces after being in the sun for 2 days, and share seeds and share experiences, how to grow this and what's going wrong with your strawberries or whatever else. Everybody grew their own food. That's how it was. Because vegetables are the most difficult thing to grow on an organic farm. I will tell you that as an organic farmer. Animal foods are easy. Easy peasy to produce. Animals take care of themselves. As long as you provide them with natural real habitat and real food. Where vegetables, that is the back-breaking food. That is the hardest food, and they don't keep. Organic vegetables, and they do not give you any predictable yields. There are no predictable results. You never know what you will get and what you won't get. That is why in the Soviet Union, that difficult task was given to every individual to grow their own vegetables. They were given a plot of land and everybody grew their own vegetables. Where meats and milk, dairy products and eggs were provided in the grocery stores. And fermented, there were a lot of fermented vegetables sold because that is in Russian culture, sauerkraut, fermented cucumbers and tomatoes and carrots and other vegetables, garlic. Now, these things were sold in grocery stores.
You got a longer shelf life. Yeah.
So that is why, despite the fact that Russians drink too much vodka and eat too much sugar, overall their health reserve is much stronger than the health in the Western countries.
That's super interesting. And just to be clear, I'm very against communism or anything like that. I don't know if it sounds like, when I'm saying decentralized, I'm not saying anything near communism. I'm not saying anything about the Soviet Union. I'm just saying, like you said, capitalism has its problems too with all the greed. I think there's somewhere in between where the individual is more responsible for themselves and communities are responsible for themselves. And I've been looking up agorism, which kind of talks about this. And it is just this more decentralized thing that I'm talking about. So I'm not trying to say a single good thing about communism, and I see the problems with capitalism as well. And this is a bit off topic, but I think we need to feed ourselves. We need to have these communities that can feed each other.
I don't think humanity invented yet a perfect system. It doesn't exist. Perhaps we're on the way to it, perhaps, but it certainly should be something where the governments play absolutely minimal role in the lives of every individual.
I love that.
Absolutely minimal role, and they are controlled tightly by the individuals, by the community. And everybody takes full responsibility for their lives, for their health, for their food, and for their actions.
That's a great way to go out on. We're talking about sovereign humans there. Again, you can go to sovereignhumans.org. I don't know what it's going to be, but I know it's exactly what Dr. Natasha is talking about, and I think a lot of people share this sentiment. Actually, I'm thinking back at many interviews I had, Joel Salatin, I just remembered him talking about this exact same concept. I think everyone's on the same page that's listening. Everyone's smart. Everyone's a critical thinker here. Everyone's independent. Everyone's taking their health into their own hands. They don't want the government stepping in, telling them what to do. I'm obsessed with this community in general, because we've all found our way through food and health, and we found this to be true. This independence, this, going against the government guidelines is what we've done to heal ourselves. And so this is our future. Thank you so much, Dr. Natasha.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing with a friend. Thanks for giving this a review on iTunes or the podcast app. Make sure to start back at episode 1. Get your regenerative meat from nosetotale.org. Find out everything else we're doing at sapien.org. We got the Dr. Gary, the health programs, the tribe. We also have the Patreon. Patreon is still kicking. We need your help. Patreon.com/peakhuman. And that's it. We'll be back next week for some more good stuff.